Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I recently found a great deal on a PC build project that had been abandoned. We've got a case, motherboard and PSU. At £24 it sounded like a bargain, but of course everything had to work. This was sold as seen with the board in unknown condition. Considering it's an AM4 motherboard, I felt it was worth the risk. Before we turn this into an affordable yet hopefully capable gaming build, let's test the parts we do have. First things first, we have the power supply. This is a 500 watt Antec VP500 V2. Now it does work, but it makes a horrible noise. I think this sounds like a fan bearing, and considering the fan almost stops immediately when I turn the PSU off, it seems like this is indeed the issue. I was going to upgrade this anyway, and I had planned to sell this to get some money to put towards the new unit, but I won't sell it if it's making this noise. I'm certainly not opening it up to replace the fan, that just doesn't seem like a good idea. Bye bye power supply. I found this nearly new MSI A650BN to replace it for £40. It seems the general consensus is that this power supply is alright. It will certainly do the job for the machine we're putting together today. For the CPU we have a Ryzen 5 5500. This is a 6-core 12-thread chip that's similar in performance to the older Ryzen 3600 though lacks PCIe 4.0. It may be slightly faster in certain games and perhaps a bit more efficient, but it's worth getting whichever is cheaper where you live. Now the whole PCIe 4 thing isn't a concern with this board or our GPU, in this case the RTX 2070 Super. I don't think we've ever reviewed this 8GB card on the channel, at least from what I can see from my previous videos, but based on used market prices, at least here in the UK, it sounds like a pretty good deal. We get access to ray tracing, DLSS and what should still be fairly solid 1080p performance for way less than 200 quid. I didn't convert any prices to euros or dollars because things vary so much at the moment, and what sounds like a good deal here might not seem that way elsewhere. I thought it made more sense to just talk about the parts I chose and then share the performance at the end. You can then see if it seems worth it for you with the prices where you live, if that makes sense. For the RAM, well, you can't go wrong with 16 gigs of 3600MHz DDR4 when it comes to a lower cost gaming rig. Now I'd suggest looking for anything over 3000MHz with Ryzen CPUs, and the performance differences with various RAM speeds will totally depend on the game you're playing. Storage wise, this board has an M.2 slot. I ended up with this 512GB Apacer NVMe. This and everything else is of course second hand. Before putting all of this together, I thought it made more sense to test the motherboard outside of the case so that we don't build it and then have to take it apart to diagnose any potential problems. Now the board did work despite its unknown status, but there was a red LED illuminated. This is the CPU light, and from my experience this either means a faulty CPU or an outdated motherboard BIOS. If you buy an older AM4 motherboard, particularly one that may not have been used in a while, it may need a BIOS update. Some boards can be updated with a USB, but this one, a more basic board, needs to be updated with an older CPU. Now luckily I have an old Ryzen 3 1200 that I keep on standby for situations like this, so I put that in the board instead, got the latest BIOS from the MSI site, put that on a USB, and then booted into the BIOS with the Ryzen 3 to flash the latest version. After this, I swapped back to the 5500 and the system worked. So with everything tested and working, I put the build together inside of our case here. Now the case itself is pretty basic, but it does have USB 3, a clear plastic side panel, enough space to hide any unused cables, and it even has a dedicated hard drive bay, which is handy if you want some extra storage but don't need the speeds of SSDs. Oh, we needed some sort of airflow in here too, of course, so I used a couple of HP fans that I originally found locally to restore an old Omen PC. Now that Omen PC ended up being totally dead, so I thought I'd use the fans here instead. One at the front and one at the back. I feel like it's been a while since we put together a gaming PC from scratch, almost anyway, but let me know your thoughts on this one. But now it's time to see what it can do. So in no particular order, we'll start the gaming tests with Battlefield 6. Now this one is quite CPU intensive, but it seems as though our 5500 and RTX 2070 Super pairing are actually holding up quite well together, and I was able to play this comfortably with the medium preset and TAA for at least 60 frames per second. Now as I said before, the Ryzen 5 5500 is very similar to the 3600 in terms of performance, and it will vary on a game by game basis as to which one comes out on top. I'd go with whichever one is cheaper where you live, to be honest. In terms of the 2070 Super, that is a lot more power hungry, but as we can see here, both of these components are getting along quite well together without any major dips or drops in performance. And I wanted to put together something relatively low cost in terms of modern parts, but something that was still capable of playing pretty much every game out there with fairly smooth frame rates. So far, so good. For Counter-Strike 2, we have 1080p of course with the high preset and MSAA off. Now this is very much a 1080p build, but in some games, like CS2 here, you could certainly push the system to 1440p while retaining similar visual settings. We were getting 152 FPS on average here with a 1% low of 66 and a 0.1% low of 49. There was the occasional dip and drop with the percentile lows, mostly when I got wiped out, which happens quite a lot, as you've probably seen in numerous videos of mine, but aside from that, performance was quite steady overall, and you should have no issues with games like this. Lighter weight esports titles. When it comes to Arc Raiders, well, this is far more GPU intensive. As you'll see here, our 2070 Super is pretty much pegged at 97 to 100% utilization most of the time, and in return we're seeing well over 60 frames per second. 91 was the average, with some pretty respectable percentile lows too, 59 and 46. I'm also using TSR at 100% resolution here, so no sacrifices with the native output. A very nice result, and I think Arc Raiders looks really good with the high visual options. As we can see, our CPU is still sitting back relaxing, consuming about 40 watts here. Our GPU is now pushing over 200. As I said, the MSI unit seemed to be okay from what I could find. It's never worth skimping on power supplies, but if you're putting together a lower cost system, you don't have to buy a super expensive PSU. There are lots out there like this one that are more than capable of handling a wide range of PC builds. I wasn't sure how Crimson Desert would run on this combination of components, but with the 2070 Super here, the medium preset and DLSS 4.0 set to quality, we were getting over 60 frames per second. 63 was the exact average. Now there were moments where we saw dips below 60 FPS, and you may want to consider DLSS 4 balanced instead, or just the low preset to start with, but I think that this is a nice balance of visual quality and performance fidelity. An 8GB card in 2026 is still fine if you plan on playing at 1080p and you are realistic with your expectations, and considering I paid less than £150 for this 2070 Super, I wouldn't expect super high frame rates at super high resolutions. Of course, you can still have a very enjoyable time without spending too much money these days. GTA 5 Enhanced is running with the very high RT preset here, so we have all the fancy effects enabled. As you can imagine, this is far more GPU intensive here, but we're still seeing over 60 FPS with DLAA enabled as well. Now DLAA takes quite the toll on our frame rate, at least compared to TAA, but it does look a lot better, and I always find that if I can still hit at least 60 FPS with DLAA enabled, then I will use it instead of TAA, just for the extra sharpness. As we can see here, it's a very nice performance result with 80 frames per second, a 1% low of 65 and a 0.1% low of 58. Very smooth overall. In Red Dead Redemption 2 here, we're using the ultra textures with everything else set to medium, the geometry LOD set to max, the grass LOD or level of detail set to 2 out of 10, and TAA set to high. This gave us 95 FPS with some dips and drops in and around those busier areas, but overall it was a fairly consistent experience with a very nice 1% low of 69 and a 0.1% low of 64. Red Dead 2 still looks fantastic in my opinion, and it performs very well on a wide range of hardware. There are plenty of graphical options to play around with. We'll finalise with Cyberpunk 2077, which I have to say did better than I was anticipating, considering the CPU in our system today. We're using the high preset, which did set the crowd density to medium by default, and I thought we may as well leave it there just to give our system a bit more headroom. I was anticipating a lot more dips and drops in those more sort of packed out areas with various NPCs walking about, and I think the medium crowd setting certainly helped alleviate some of the potential problems. 75 FPS overall, a 1% low of 49 and a 0.1% low of 41. In fact, I ran a benchmark through a pretty busy scene and I was surprised to see it hold up better than anticipated. So this, as well as the Ryzen 3600, I would still make for a good choice, I think, for a lower cost gaming rig. Overall, I'm pretty happy that we were able to save this cheap abandoned build. The start of something great existed in this case, and I'm glad we were able to complete it and get it running as a lower cost, yet somewhat capable gaming system. But let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you as always for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.